Welcome to the Impact Sales Tribe VIP call for January 26, 2023. I'm excited about being here. There's always a level of excitement with me when I jump into to do these episodes, but this one I like a lot because this is what I would call definitely an oldie but a goodie. And the interesting thing about this is something that I can still remember hearing from one of my first mentors in my first sales job. Like, this goes that far back. And, we're going to be digging into something in the VIP call today, and then we're going to open it up for questions. I know there'll be some questions. And we're going to talk about this because I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with in today's market. Part of it is because we live in this fast-paced society and people think that they have to be on the offensive all the time in the way they approach their business. And, but one of my early mentors told me a long time ago, after he got to spend a little bit of time with me, he pulled me aside and he said, "Joe, I want to share some advice with you. And I want to share this. I want to pass this on because this is something that I learned and I think you'll get a lot out of this." And he said, "Joe, you need to stop telling people things and start sharing things with people." And I wasn't exactly sure what he meant when he first said it, but then he kind of went into clarifying what he meant. And that's what we're going to do today for the first half of the VIP call. We're going to clarify what I mean when I say stop telling people things and start sharing. Just recorded a podcast episode for the Impact Sales Podcast about this. I think this is it's a glaring gap and it's a deficiency that a lot of people struggle with out there. I think it's common for people to struggle with this, but a lot of people run out there and they want to default to telling people things about their business, about how great their business is, about the features and the benefits of their product or service, about all the amazing things their business can do. And they're in this telling mode. And the problem with that is you tend to alienate a lot more people than you win over when you are full on the offensive, right? And we cover this, in different ways in ISM. But today we're going to be talking about the importance of sharing versus telling. And this is a big one because a lot of people miss out on opportunities to further enhance the relationship they have with their prospects, to further enhance the likelihood of them becoming a trusted advisor. And you guys, I know you probably wish you had $1 for every time you heard me say trusted advisor, but I'm telling you, that's kind of where you want to go. That's what you want to aspire to. They diminish the likelihood of having a successful sales outcome. Like, they hamstring themselves by way of potentially closing a transaction with a client because all they're doing is telling and they're not sharing. And we're going to talk a little bit about the difference of that. We're going to talk about why it's so powerful. And more importantly, what it can do to create a difference in your sales success. So the first thing, and this is the part that I know is going to resonate for all of you because you've been through ISM, you understand this, you know the power of this. But the first thing is, before you ever share, and you know this from ISM, you need to listen first to what means most to your prospects. Like, you need to know what really rings their bell, what really makes them happy, what are the things they're looking for, what are the pain points they have that they need to address, what great goal or thing that they need to be satisfied, whatever is going to make their business, their personal life, their employees happier and better, whatever it is. You need to listen first to what is important to them, right? That's a big, big deal. You need to make sure that you are seeing that and covering that in a big way. So first thing is, you're going to listen first to what means the most to your prospect. You're going to ask those impact-focused questions. For those of you that have been through ISM, you know kind of what they are. They're the questions that are designed to get your prospect to share more, specifically more about what is important to them and what the impact on those things would be for them. Whether it's personal, financial, emotional, whatever the category, those impact focused questions tell you what you need to know about what's important to your prospect. And you really need to uncover that. So the same rule applies when you're talking about sharing instead of telling. You need to first understand the lay of the land. You need to understand what's most important, right? Now, the missing piece, the piece that people struggle with sharing, is how you go about doing it in a productive way. Like, how do you go about sharing with people in a way that's extremely productive, that puts them in a place that they get the maximum value from what it is, and ultimately have the most amount of interest in wanting to work with you? So let's talk about kind of what that looks like, and let's explain the power behind this. So the reason why you need to identify those answers to those impact focused questions so deeply is so you can create a bond, a synergy, some degree of relatability with your prospect, right? And this is a whole other level of emotional selling that we don't get into in ISM, but it's really, really powerful because it sets you apart from so many other people in so many different ways, and it increases your likelihood for closing dramatically. So when you identify what means the most to your prospect and truly what the impact is on them, and again, you've identified it because you've asked the right questions, they've shared, and you've kept going back and getting clarifications as to what the depth of the meaning is, so you really have a good grasp of it. You then can share what we call relevant stories, analogies, or comparisons, right? For those of you that have spent some time with me, one-on-one and in a training environment, or just talking, one thing about me, and you may not even realize you know it about me, but I do this in almost every interaction I have, practically every interaction, certainly every interaction if there's a sale involved. But most of the time when I communicate, at some point or another, I share some degree of a relevant story, an analogy, or a comparison. Now, there is a method to the madness, and the reason why I do it is because I know what a lot of elite sales performers know, is that when you share a relevant story, analogy, or comparison, you now are able to become relatable to your prospect and come at them in a place that is most agreeable to them. For example, and I just shared this on a podcast episode that I recorded earlier, but you'll hear it later again. I had a client, a number of years ago, who was going through some internal transitions within his business. And he brought me in as a consultant to look at a couple of things and work on a few things. And he brought to my attention what some of his internal challenges were going to be. He mentioned that he had some outliers in the organization. He had some, I don't want to say enemies, but he had some people that weren't aligned with his vision. He had a number of different challenges that he had to navigate. And before we ever talked about product, before we ever talked about a solution, which, by the way, I did have a solution, a product that, a service really that I could offer him that would have made things better. But before we ever got into that, I shared with him a relevant story from my own experience. I, told him, back in my corporate days when I took over a large team, it was a team where I was the new guy. I inherited an underperforming team. I knew I had to turn this team around. There was a lot relying on it. And I briefly told him the story of what I did and how I won this team over. Now, this was before we got into the product, the service, the solution that I could offer him. He was so appreciative of me sharing that we started talking, just not even as, service provider to client. It became more of a friendly conversation, two guys talking about kind of stories from the war, right? Just one of those type connections. And, he didn't realize it. I knew it because it's something I've done my whole career. We were developing a true emotional bond, a connection during this interaction. We were connecting. And the power behind that was because it was something from my own experience. It was very relatable. And when the time came for me to talk about specific solutions, I had shared with him first. I shared with him the story. I shared with him kind of what I did and how I overcame it. And, it was very easy to tie in the solution that I wanted to recommend. In fact, the question came back, and it's still one of those beautiful questions that every sales professional, no matter what you sell, would love to hear. And, he came back and asked me, he said, Joe, if you were in my shoes, what specifically would you do? Right? If you were in my shoes specifically, what would you do? And it was because I shared a relevant story. Now, it doesn't have to be a story. It could be an analogy, a comparison, something that makes you relatable to your prospect, right? This is a whole different emotional level connection that you're trying to make with them. Now, I know not everybody is comfortable being out there and sharing a lot of things, but I'm telling you, if you are able to get comfortable with sharing experiences and sharing relevant stories and analogies, you become much more relatable to your prospects. If you sit on the outside and all you do is tell them about a product, about a service, about a feature, about a benefit, if all you do is remain in telling mode, you are diminishing the effect of those impact focused questions. You're diminishing your ability to be able to really help your prospect because they're not making the same connection with you. Now, in some cases, the situation may not completely align with your own experiences. Now, at the top of the list, if you have an experience, an analogy that you can use that involved you or a comparison of something you went through, that's always going to be the most powerful. It'll be at the top of the list. If you're taking notes, write down personal experience, personal stories, personal analogies, personal comparisons. Circle the word personal, because if they're personal and you share them, you're creating a bond. You're creating a connection, right? You're relatable. And along with that relatability comes an implied connection. And once you show them a solution, you now have earned the right to do business with them. People are going to do business with people they know, like, and trust. Well, people like you more when you're relatable. People like you more when you seem just like them. You're not coming at them from above them or below them. You're just like them. You went through something similar. At the top of the list, the most powerful format of that is your personal connection, your personal story, analogy, or comparison. Now, not everybody has all the relevant necessary stories to be able to share with somebody to make that connection. That is true. The next option, the second option, very powerful, not as powerful, but very powerful, is to share a relevant story that somebody else has experienced that you are aware of. Doesn't have to be your story. It could be somebody else's story, as long as you portray it in the right way, as long as you are direct, sharing, look, it's not my story, but I know this happened, or this person went through this. I know of this experience, this analogy, this comparison. It becomes very easy to develop a different level connection with your prospect when you share. If you align with your prospects that way, when it comes time to talk about your product, your service, your feature, your benefit, whatever it is, you aren't just product dumping on them. You aren't just pitching them. You're now a solutions provider. You're now a trusted advisor, because you would have asked for the right to go through and show them the solution. You would have developed a deeper relationship with them by your interaction, by sharing those stories, those analogies, those comparisons. And I know there are people on this call right now that are going, man, Joe's right. He does that all the time. He tells stories. He shares examples. I walk the talk. I've been doing this for 34 years. I go and do this wherever possible because I know I can relate to people better by sharing stories. I just know it's the bridge towards making that connection stronger. Now, what that really has to do with, and it's something that I think you all have heard me say, or heard me say as well, what you're really trying to get towards is more of an emotional heart connection to your prospect. See, people connect on different levels. Sometimes they make a head connection. It logically makes sense. There's a head connection. I get it. It resonates with me, right? But the most powerful one is a heart connection. You all know this. The reason is people make decisions and buy emotionally. Now, emotionally does not mean impulsively. Some people question, well, does that mean impulsively, like without reason? No. Emotionally means there's some emotion connected to the decision. And as a result, that emotion is a factor in why they make one decision versus another. And we all know that emotions drive decisions. Logic provides the support to move forward with the decision. It still has to make sense. It still has to work. There has to be logic. But you first have to make that heart connection with your prospect to power position yourself as a trusted advisor. And that comes with listening to what they say is most important to them, providing some degree of a story, a comparison, or analogy, and then making that connection, making sure that they get that you feel for the position that they're in, good, bad, or otherwise. Now, that heart connection, that story, that comparison, that analogy doesn't have to be a good story. It doesn't have to be a successful story. Some of the most committed clients that I've ever worked with have been the ones that I shared a failure story with, or I shared a poor experience of something. And then I connected it with the solution that brought me back from that place, that position, that story, right? It doesn't necessarily only have to be positive. It can be perceived and positioned negatively, and then you turn around and provide the path to make it better. But it's important that the heart connection is made. And the reason is when it comes time for them to decide whether it makes sense for them and whether emotionally you're worthy of that commitment with them. I know this sounds a little bit like a relationship coaching session. It's not. It is in a way, but it's not. It's really connected to sales. You have to have that heart connection in place to make the best result happen. It just needs to be there. Now, I'm not saying it has to be the strongest heart connection, and everybody's got their own degree of comfort with what they will and won't share, how far or how deep they'll share stories. But I will tell you, if you were to take two professionals side by side with comparable products and services, and they do the same type things, same results, and you lay them side by side, the person that only tells their prospect about their business, their product, their feature, the benefits, all that, if they only tell them and don't share with them a comparison, a story, an analogy, if they don't share with them those things, they will almost always lose out to the person that will. Just like we know impact focused questions will position people the right way and position you as a trusted advisor, sharing the story immediately before providing the product or service will make all the difference in the world. Now, I'm not saying that you'll win every client. Of course you won't. It doesn't happen that way. Nor am I saying that you'll lose every client if you don't do it. But what I'm saying is if you want to dial up your sales results, if you want to dial up the outcomes, if you want to dial up the relationship component, if you want to make sure you take it to the next level, make that heart connection with your prospect. Now, this is a whole other layer embedded inside of ISM that we don't really cover through the course material because this is really digging deep, but I'm telling you, it makes a big difference. That same client that I mentioned, the one that I connected with, that I shared one of my corporate experiences when I took over a challenging team, he has not only been a great consulting client that we've worked with for many years, he's referred 3 other clients to us. And I've been able to work with these 3 other people. He continues to refer people to us. And the reason is that heart connection, that relationship, that connection that we've made has made all the difference in the world. And for him as well, it's one of those types of relationships. Now, this isn't, a topic that I'm saying that you have to make that degree of communication or connection. But if you really want to thrive, at the top part of know, like, and trust and get them to be comfortable with you as their trusted advisor, you want to try to make that heart connection, because once you make that heart connection with them, Then and only then should you start telling them specifically about your product, your service, your feature, or your benefits. And a lot of people out there in today's world, and you know this because you guys see it. You see it now, especially if you've been through ISM and you look at other people now and you go, what are they thinking? What are they doing? How are they approaching this? You know, just going out there and just pitching, just telling people without building the right rapport and digging deep enough is almost always going to leave you unsatisfied with the results that you're looking for. Not in every case, but in many cases. Now, the reason why this is so important and the reason why these types of nuances, you know, really have a big impact on people is because today's consumer, today's buyer is more educated than ever before. They have more information available at their disposal than ever before. In many cases, they know 60, 70, sometimes 80% of what's out there when you're talking to them. They have done their homework. And as a result, like for like, product for product being the same, if your product is about the same as everybody else's or close to the same, or even just a little bit better, but not enough to really at a glance tell the difference, well, you better do something to step up your game. These are the types of things that step up your game. Instead of just telling people, share stories, share analogies, share comparisons. If they're your stories to share, like I said before, that is always going to be the most powerful. It's going to resonate the best with people. You know, for somebody to say, I know this person can help me, it's so much easier for them to say that when you share a relevant story or a comparison that you've been through yourself and they go, oh my gosh, you've been there. You know it. You know it. I'll tell you what, one of the things that I love as well in sales interactions is when I have the opportunity to be face-to-face, whether it's in person or on Zoom, and somebody can look in my eyes and know when I'm sharing that story, that is resonating with me just like it's resonating with them. It's that real. It's that true to them. And that makes all the difference in the world for people. You know, if they want to perceive you as their trusted advisor, they need to be able to look in your eyes and know you've been there. You know what you're talking about. You understand. You get me. However they define it, they need to see that and feel it. They need to know when you share, you're sharing to build that bond, that connection. Now, the most important things to consider are obviously make those stories relevant, make them connected to the issue, to the goal, to the problem, to the need, to the impact focused result that they want, whatever it is. Make sure your story is relevant. Make sure your story connects to them at a different level. And I think that makes all the difference for people. When they get that, they can immediately go, this person gets it. This person's been there. They have the answer. I need to listen more. There's something that they have that I need to get. And this is such a game changer for people because we spend way too much time thinking about what the end result needs to be that we forget that we can shortchange our results by skipping little things like this. Like it's very easy to ask people impact focused questions and then go out there and start filling the gap of a need with a product or service you have and then tying it back to what they want to accomplish. Makes complete sense. But is the relationship that you created with them strong enough by doing that? Maybe in some cases it is. In many cases, it's not. And if you really want to take it to the next level, start digging deeper, start sharing some more stories, start developing a bond with people. Make them laugh, make them cry, make them get that you understand kind of where they are and what they're going through. And you will find that your results will be much better. If you find yourself telling people more than sharing with them, you will find that it will be a harder road to sales success. But if you find ways of sharing stories and comparisons and analogies that connect to them, you're going to find that your sale will be a lot more likely within your reach. It will become a lot more likely that you'll be successful. And I think for all of you, you need to keep in mind that no matter what you do in this process, if at the end of all of this, for whatever reason, they don't work with you, that they either can't, they don't, whatever. If the net result is they don't work with you, you are paid in other ways. You are paid when you generate warm and friendly introductions from other clients. When those warm and friendly introductions come in and it makes it easier for you to win other business, that's still a win. But your power in getting that happens when you make that heart connection, when you share stories, comparisons, and analogies. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. I know this is a whole different level, kind of peeling back another layer of ISM and digging deeper into it with that heart connection. But I'm going to tell you, when you get really good at doing this, you've all heard this, stories sell, comparisons sell, analogies sell. They all do. And you're going to find it's much easier to relate to your prospects when you handle it that way. Okay, well, that's what I had to cover today. Let's open things up to some questions on the VIP. Doesn't have to be related to today's topic. I'll field them for any category. Let's try to find some on today's topic. But if there's other questions you have as well, we'll answer those as well. Who's got something for me today?
Hi. Oh, David, do you want to go? Oh, okay.
No, go ahead, Susie.
Okay.
Hey, Susie.
All right. So this may be splitting hairs, but when you're talking about sharing a story, a relatable story, do you stop at the story and wait for the prospect or the suspect to ask you of the results, or do you automatically give the positive end result?
Yeah, I think in that situation, share with them the outcome. Share with them the outcome. You don't necessarily you don't have to, but what I think is most powerful is, especially when you tell the story the right way, they want to hear the outcome. Susie, they want to hear, and one of my favorite phrases is, and you know what happened? And you know what happened? I did this, I did this, I did this, I tried that. And you know what happened? That's exactly the way you unfold a story, but you do it in a way that makes sense, that, they're kind of waiting for it. Sometimes the end result isn't good. Sometimes it's, and you know what happened? Nothing. Fell on my face. I tried that. It didn't work. That's why I know we need to look in other directions. Like, it doesn't matter how you tell the story, but I think you need to share the outcome. And I don't think it's splitting hairs, Susie. The problem, if you don't share the outcome, is you don't always know if the story resonates without sharing it. Like there might not be enough wow factor for them to go, huh, yeah, there's something to that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Good. You're very welcome. My pleasure. David, you had a question?
Yeah, it really all comes down to asking good impact questions, though, because if I'm understanding you correctly, this is where you would insert these relatable stories when you get to the heart of the matter. So, would you say that you could relate, you could relay or share stories too soon?
Not necessarily. I don't know if there is too soon. I think any time after you start asking them impact focused questions is fine. But here's the thing about the stories, David, and this is something you really want to remember. You want your stories to be relevant to what they share in the impact focused questions. Like, if they share specific needs, wants, desires, and it means a lot to them, having that information makes your storytelling and the focus so much more clear. You have complete clarity. You know what means something to them. If you start too early you really can't align completely because you haven't gotten from them, in their own words, what means the most to them.
Yeah, because then you're not, you have to do the heart work, as we
Exactly.
call it, to
Exactly. Now,
relate what's coming from them.
completely. Now, of the two, like, look, of the two situations, like when it came to, do we include this in ISM or do we not include this in ISM? The only reason that I didn't dig that level of deep into it in ISM was it's much more important that you ask the impact focused questions, because if you ask those questions, you should have most of everything that you need to be able to win the client. Um, this is another level. This is an elite type level. um you should be able to do them both, and you do them both well, and you'll do really well with it. But the impact focused questions should always be first. That's where you want that to be. You kind of know what you need to go with. Like, you kind of know what comparison, analogy, or story you probably need to share if you get those things from your prospect.
Yeah, yeah,
Does that make sense?
absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly relatable, but the feeling, and how the problem is affecting you, there's a lot of ways that we can relate to other people in that respect.
Sure. Well, look at the state of the world that we live in today. Who do you listen to when you look at somebody being out there online? Do you listen to that person that says, I do this, this, and this, I have this product, I have that service, I can do this, I can do that? Or do you listen to that person that offers up some degree of an interesting story or relevant situation that resonates with you? And that tells you which one makes the connection. Now, do you roll out your best stuff to attract people and then not have anything later? No, you want to be able to appeal to the masses, but then really get specific to make the connection when you know what matters to them. You still have to default to what matters most to your prospect. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
of course, of
and
course.
I'm gonna date myself, but it's relevant, and I'm gonna exclude the profanity. Although I don't know if there was profanity in this exact line, but there was a really great line, and it was so accurate as it relates to sell in the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, right? Great line at the end of the movie. Al Pacino is scolding uh Kevin Spacey because Kevin Spacey said something in front of a prospect who had signed an agreement, and he wasn't aware of exactly where that prospect was, what he was thinking, where he was in the state of the process emotionally. He didn't know what Al Pacino called the play, right? He didn't know where the guy was, what was thinking, what was going on. And he basically said, you don't open your mouth until you know the play, until you know what is going on with the prospect, right? And this is a prime example of that. Like, until you know what matters most, where they are emotionally, you don't know what to say. You don't know what to highlight. You don't know what to really get across. And, it's irresponsible if you just throw it out there without knowing. Maybe it hits the mark, but it's kind of wild. So, yeah, you're on the right track, David. If you keep it focused on getting the questions asked and answered, getting a really, really good sense of specifically what that particular prospect needs most and is most interested in, the biggest impact, then you tie your story to that, your comparison, your analogy. That is the power. That's where the connection is. Does that make sense?
Crystal
Awesome.
clear.
Awesome. Yeah, I should be crystal clear. I had an extra week off. I didn't do one of these last week, so dialed up my clarity a little bit. But no, this is a big one. This is one that I think I cringe. I cringe when I see it out there from people that are just telling people constantly, don't know anything about their prospect. And then when they start to learn things about their prospect, then they go back to telling again. Like, they just go right back to telling again. Just start sharing, just start telling people stories. People will be drawn to you. Why do social media apps, pick one, insert common name of the day? We'll pick on TikTok. Why do social media apps like that, and people go viral the way they do. And it's not just cat videos and quirky memes. It's also because there are some compelling stories in short form that grab people's attention. And it makes a connection. It kind of makes them laugh and go, that's me. Or, I've been through that. Or, I hear you, brother. I know what you're talking about. Like, there's a true relatability. And selling first, to be able to be successful, is you have to be relatable. You have to get people to kind of connect with you a little bit. And then you can dial up that connection when you really, really figure out how to share the right story, comparison, or analogy. Okay, so what other questions do we have?
Morning, Joe. How are you?
Good. Hey, Adonis, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Awesome.
Been on a ton of calls lately, just trying to implement everything that I'm learning, right? One
Great.
of the big things that I always think about since I started my business about 4 or 5 years ago is if you're doing all of these impact questions, if you're really orchestrating and going about your relationships the right way, my question is it super necessary in your opinion to have a website if people know what you do, the type of person that you are, they have a relationship with you. And even for people that don't have a relationship with you yet, like if you're going about this process the right way in your business development and things like that, what are your thoughts on the need for a website or the importance of a website in today's age? Because I'm
Sure.
thinking through, because I had a website. It wasn't the best. I wanted to redesign and potentially invest in another one. But I'm just asking myself the question of, is it super necessary?
Sure.
So
Great question. Here's what's necessary. And then, I'm going to answer this question for you in a roundabout way. Here's what's necessary. Credibility is necessary. Social proof is necessary. Relatability is necessary. Competence is necessary. A website enhances those things, but it's not the only way of accomplishing those things. There's a lot of people that don't have an active website. They work off of a company page on social media. There's people that have a landing page, just a single landing page. It's not really a website, it's a landing page. It's really a funnel, and it captures data, and it has basic contact information and some relevant information, not really a website. So the long answer is no, it may not be necessary. I think it's one other credibility tool. If you think of, a brick and mortar type sense, if you have a brick and mortar storefront and you don't have at least a sign on the front that tells people what's inside, will they walk in? Will they look around? Will they take a close look at what it is that you do? I don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's to me, it's a credibility tool. It validates certain things. It's not the only way by any means. In today's day and age, you could be relevant on a few social media platforms, get significant followers, significant impact and visibility, and not necessarily have a formal website. You could drive people to a scheduling tool that gets them on a call with you, and then you talk about your product or service. You give them, what other form of credibility you have available, social proof, testimonials, references, whatever. Maybe they're things that are already on like LinkedIn or other platforms, and that's enough. So the short answer is it completely necessary? It depends on what you're trying to portray. In my opinion, no. If there's enough other credibility tools out there, Adonis, and it's getting across who you are, what you're about, and what you can deliver, a website might not be that important.
yeah, I been doing a lot more thinking about it because as I talk with lead gen companies and companies that are going to help me, break out even more in 2023.
Yep.
Some of the recommendations that have come through have been, websites or things to share, which I have things to share for sure. I've got good testimonials. You can look at my LinkedIn and see what I've been able to do.
Mm-hmm.
but and it's gotten me business so far, so that's great. So to your point, social media, a free avenue of exposure in most
Yep.
cases, can indeed break down barriers and get people to see that you're capable of a lot. But I think also to your point, website is just an extra tool, so to speak, if you want to get people to believe in you a little bit more,
Sure.
potentially. So it's not something I'm against. It's just something that
Yeah.
I've been thinking through because I've had a good level of success so far without one.
Yeah.
Can I just say something?
Of course.
Adonis, I have the exact same dilemma going on, and here's why. I do have a website. I got it through a very good provider, so it's relatively little expense, but every once in a while, because most of my 99% of my transactions or communications are on LinkedIn. And so I'm getting hundreds of visitors to my LinkedIn profile all the time. So I did a quick comparison. I went to my website, which I rarely, unless I'm adding a testimonial, I rarely look at it. And the numbers there are like 5, 7, 3.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even though it's a gorgeous website and I'm really proud of it, and it tells everybody everything they need to know about me and my business and my services, I am looking at it like, let's say once every couple of weeks, and I'm seeing numbers like handfuls of visitors.
Yeah.
And I ask myself every day, is it worth me paying this I don't even know what it is, $150 a year? Or it's a little bit more than that, but it's not a lot.
That's a fantastic deal, I'd say.
That's a really good deal.
To sustain this, is it worth it? Do I really, really need this when everything's being taken care of? My LinkedIn profile covers everything.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway,
I gotta visit your website now.
Yeah. Let's everybody go to Susie's
Net.
website so her numbers spike on her website. One of the things too, and it's so important to remember this, and I want to share this because I think it's relevant to this particular question, especially. No matter what in business, no matter what you're offering, you really are also in the process of figuring out how do I plug the holes of what people perceive as not enough, right? And I'll give you a quick example. And I know, I reached out to some people recently for some testimonials on LinkedIn. I've always forgotten kind of about testimonials on LinkedIn. And I kind of forgot about it. And I was reminded of this when I asked one of my trusted advisors, my own personal network. I said, hey, do me a favor. Look at a couple of things. We're working on a bunch of things with the sales activists. Look at a few things. Give me your input. I'm just curious. And this guy knows my background. I've done business with him in a couple of different environments. He knows what we do and the impact it has. So there's no questions there. But he said, you've got a compelling story, you got a compelling offer, you got great background, you have these great successes. He goes, but I only see 14 testimonials on your LinkedIn page. And as much as all that the accolades were important, I thought to myself, he's right, because there's a certain segment of people that may look at that and go, oh, there's only 14 testimonials. Like, I don't know what the magic number is, but there's always going to be somebody that no matter what it is that you do is going to poke a hole at it or have a problem with it. And all we're trying to do, and all of us try to do as professionals, is to figure out, how do I minimize that? How do I fill that gap? How do I do this? And you can overthink it. But to me, I do it this way. Like, and we go through this with the sales activists. I go through this with my consulting business. I look at what's generating business, like what is working, and figure out how to make that better. And then I look at what's not working and not attracting business. And if it's not, I figure out if it's fixable. If it's not fixable, I move on and I stop doing it and I do something else. And I think this is a prime example of that, whether it's a website or any other thing. If it's not doing enough for you, you may not need it. Now, at that point, it just becomes a cost benefit analysis. Does it make sense to keep it financially? So yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, Adonis. I think ultimately we all struggle with, do I need that? Do I need this? Do I need that? I don't think you can ever have every single thing that you do dialed in completely. I think there's always things that may not be perfect, but the world doesn't need perfect. The world needs results. So, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I look at stuff, I put it out there. I try to make it as good as possible. I'd rather get things going than worry about whether or not it's perfect or not.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. And that's kind of how I've looked at it over the last 4 years of running this business is I've never really had too much of an online presence beyond LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And, I still end up getting clients. So
Yep.
it's a testament to obviously I'm a sales guy through and through, but also, like if kind of on the lines of what you're talking about with this relationships and how to do them properly and how to share stories and how to be, just straight up with people and be a good guy. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's more than half the battle. So
Oh,
people just want to do
absolutely.
business with someone they trust, that someone they like, and somebody they know is not going to take advantage of them.
Of
And
course.
that works in our favor, right? Because yeah, there's a lot of people out there that aren't necessarily doing that or showing that.
Sure. Yeah. And look, I think that's a great point to underline. The more you remain focused on that, the more business and the more people that are attracted to you. Like, I think if you go about doing business that way, like my objective is to have people know, like, and trust me. I know that not everybody will work with me, but because I'm focused on that objective, people will eventually work with me. And if you
Right.
focus on that, I just think, a lot more good is going to happen. I don't think perfection is that critical. I just think, make enough connections, make sure the numbers are working in your favor, and stay focused on what you just described, that know, like, and trust factor.
Yep. Sounds great.
Awesome. Great. So what other questions do we have?
Kind of along the same vein.
Uh-huh.
So you probably come across this question a lot, I'd imagine, but I've also come across it and I've never really seen the impact of it. It's kind of the same, almost along the same question of the website, but also LinkedIn content. I see
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are big on LinkedIn content. And to me, the more I look at it, the more I scroll on it every day. I
Mm-hmm.
just don't know if I'm really seeing authenticity. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of,
Yeah.
just an echo chamber of the same type of self-love, do this, do that, a lot of telling on there. And
Yep.
and there is a lot of sharing too. And you see that you can build a brand on LinkedIn and people start to like you, like your stories, that type of stuff.
Sure.
But um in the big scheme of things, I also see a ton of people who are making way more. Like if I'm looking at the people who make the most money,
Yeah.
like the biggest CEOs, the biggest names in their industries, a lot of them aren't posting content. so
Yeah.
so what are your thoughts on LinkedIn content from that vantage point?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of points to that. I agree with you completely. I struggle with it because it's a time thing. I I know, especially in the world of AI, it's easy to think that you could just keep putting content out there, but does it really resonate with people and is it genuine? Like, the other factor people aren't talking about with AI, and I love AI. I think AI solutions are great, and I think it can do certain things, right? The
Yep.
other thing, the other side of the coin is now going to be, are people going to become more critical of your content because they're going to think you're using an AI, or is it really your voice? So I think the number one thing in that example, Adonis, is you have to figure out your voice. I agree with what you just said. Now we unfortunately live in a time, I affectionately call it Generation Me, because everything is about me, me, me. Like, you have to, when people that are out there, they're all about posting themselves. And there's selfies, there's selfie posts, there's people that are only talking about things that they're doing. you know, the people that stand out are the ones that don't do that as much. They do a little bit of it because it's kind of a little necessary, but it's more about finding that impact and finding those relatable points. So I believe content is important. I believe, just like what you described, ad fatigue, content fatigue is setting in with people. Like, are people going to spend as much time and focus on that going forward? No. And why is that? And it's part of the reason why we're shifting a bit towards some short form video content, because people don't really want to spend time reading as much if they can avoid it. If you get their attention in 30 to 45 seconds, great. But after that, they're gone. They're on to the next thing. They scroll past it. So I think the number one thing, Adonis, is you have to find your voice. The voice has to be yours, it has to be genuine. I think it does always have to be about the impact on the other person. So, you make it about what they get. And, you have to look at the world around you and say, how am I different? Like, that's the question that I'm going through with the sales activist and with our consulting business as we try to grow in different directions. And some of you know the challenges that we're going through trying to do it. It's differentiation. That's what the key is, figuring out how you differentiate yourself, what you do differently, what stands out to diminish that scroll. Like, you don't want to be swiped away or scrolled away on social media. You want somebody laser focused on what you're saying or doing. So you find your voice, you stick with what's true to your mission and the impact it has on people, and then you differentiate. Like, I think you have to figure out your differentiation path. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. I think oftentimes perhaps maybe my views on how to do things are a little bit more on the controversial side too. So I do think
That's okay.
that works to my advantage sometimes, but other times, it could also anger people. So
Well, you know what? I look, under the category of no, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
yeah.
If people are paying attention, that's great. Now, what happens, and this is something to consider, and this is, I've been through this because I've had people challenge me on different things I've said. And I've had people do it publicly. I've had people do it privately. I've had people share things that they disagreed with me on. That's okay. One of the things that you always got to go back to and just keep in mind as it relates to that is, no matter whether they love you at the beginning or hate you at the beginning, the process remains the same. You're still trying to win them over. If you're not their cup of tea and they decide to tune out, that's the way it is. Nothing you can do about it. And you win over the people that remain engaged. But just because somebody may seem like they're a hater or just isn't into what you're doing doesn't mean they can't become a raving fan later on. I've seen this happen. I'll share a story without getting into the specific people, because if I mention a name, you'll know the name, you recognize the person. I had a very high profile associate client that we had done some things together, and I don't really promote him or talk about him much anymore. And he doesn't really talk about me much anymore. We're in similar fields. Right. And as far as we didn't follow each other on social media anymore, it kind of just got to that point where we just stayed in our lanes, separate from each other. And there was something, we were still connected, I think, on LinkedIn. And there was something that he posted that resonated with me. And I responded positively. I responded like, you know what, brother? I hear you. I love it. I'm 100% with you on this. I know we don't always agree, but you got my attention with this one. And the guy called me. Like, he called me. It wasn't even like a, hey, thanks, nice to hear from you. He picked up the phone and he called me and he said, you and I have butted heads a couple of times. We go about this different. There's got to be a way we can put that aside. Because I was going back, I was looking at some of your stuff, I was looking at my stuff, and we're not that far apart. We say it differently, but we're not that far apart. Let's brainstorm this a little bit. So to your point, Adonis, even if you upset them, even if they don't like you and you do something that doesn't rub them the right way, it doesn't mean a month from now or 6 months from now or 2 years from now you won't say something that they think is brilliant and they don't jump right back on the Adonis bandwagon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't really worry too much about um, you know, them tuning out, so to speak. I just know that we're in a society that's very different from the way it used to be, and cancel culture is a very real thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
definitely, I wouldn't say that there's no such thing as bad publicity anymore, just because of the way that things are.
Well, I mean, there's
But
degrees, of course. I'm talking
yeah,
like
so you
general
you know
business.
you have to be kind of careful about like
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you say certain things, whether it's true or not. People don't really care about that anymore. They just kind of
yeah,
care about what they feel. And so
yeah.
there's some things you just kind of got to keep under the hood of the car.
Of course.
So it's discretion and knowing like what LinkedIn content is. You got to filter all that out and say, okay, what's going to keep me relevant and
Mhm.
help people, but at the same time, like, there's some truth you share that people just don't accept or just can't handle. So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And you're on the right track with that because there is always going to be people that won't align with what you're thinking or sharing. And as long as you are appropriate in the way you handle it, I'm at my core, I'm a conservative type guy generally, and I'm always cautious about what I say. I try not to cross lines or alienate
Yep.
people. I think that's smart for a lot of reasons. Um, there are certain things that I don't necessarily believe that should be front facing in business. I think, to avoid conflicts, I think should be very careful when you're talking about politics and religion and all these other things that come up that really stir people up, right?
Yep.
You could be respectful of anybody else's beliefs or thoughts or whatever it might be. The problem is too many times people get worked up that distract themselves and others from getting what they really need. Like,
Yep.
when you look at all these social media platforms, and this has impacted sales significantly, people are leaving platforms because of the tone of what is shared. Platforms are banning people because of what they say. Like you have to look at it all and realize, do you want to deal with drama or do you want to deal with results? Like, and
Yeah.
it doesn't mean you can't have an opinion, but you have to be very cautious because if your opinion shortchanges your results because it restricts your ability, then it might not be the right time and place for your opinion to be out there.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
It's a
and that's a
platform to
call
do.
for everybody. Like, as adults, we all have that right to free will. You can say what you want, but you have to be willing to deal with the consequences. Like I'm one of those people, like I'm very open. I listen, I observe a lot, and I'm cautious. Now, not everybody's like that. That's okay. But what I know in selling, especially considering how challenging it can be sometimes, you want to keep yourself open to as much as possible, right? You don't want to alienate anybody if you can avoid it. And it makes things easier if you can do that.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we went a couple minutes over, but that's okay. I think it was some really, really great questions today. We have some very interesting VIP calls coming up next week and the week after. So stay tuned. I'm going to share a little bit about what's coming in the next few days, so you'll get a little excited about it. I want to start getting more and more people engaged in the Impact Sales Tribe VIP call. And if you guys need me for anything, don't hesitate. Just reach out. You know how you can reach me. Get me on anywhere on social media. You have all my access that you need. You can also check out our digital assistant at any time. It's texting the word sales to the number 409-509-7355. Can even schedule appointments right through that digital assistant now. So check it out if you need to connect with me. I'll be here, and you guys have a great week. We'll talk soon.